Well over an hour has passed since we first sat down together. In the meantime, the cafe has filled up considerably, with a subsequent rise in the noise level emerging from loud conversations held in Upper Austrian dialect. Hi, this is Kim.E from isnotso.com, and you are listening to Enter the Dark, Part 2. Spring has not only drawn the locals outside of their homes and into social circles, but has also positively infected their typically serious demeanor. The young man seated opposite has me completely immersed in his captivating story. Up until now, his story embodied what I would consider conventional teenage escapades. As always, the degree of adversity of such experiences always depends on our circle of friends, our emotional stability, and more importantly, the cultural environment we are surrounded by. Yes, many of us had our teenage phases where we secretly got drunk with friends and had the time of our lives before regretful hangovers or shame of our drunken behavior consumed us. Yet, we did it all over again because our teenage rebel rousers wished to eternally capture those exhilarating moments of unrestricted freedom. In our defense, a childhood surrounded by adults who regularly drink alcohol on random and social occasions, in turn, creates a sense of normality to do exactly that when older. Austria is a country I never grew up in, so I couldn't ascertain whether smoking weed or popping tablets was a teenage norm here or not. As his story unfolded, I began to understand the danger looming like a sword of Damocles over the head of every teenager. I vaguely remembered hearing specific terms, although they seemed to be the kind of stuff movies were made of. My naivety was obvious, my shock apparent. Seek and thee shall find certainly rings true nowadays. Answers and solutions to any questions, if suitably formulated, are instantly accessible. The output of information disregarded any moral or ethical standards. I considered myself to be an understanding mother who embraced diversity and welcomed the unstoppable advances of new technologies. Yet the ignorance I had towards specific topics caused me to contemplate the seriousness of my irresponsible inaction. Was I too afraid of what I would discover? Probably. There was so much I could not control or filter. Every parent's nightmare is the inability to protect one's offspring. Teaching my kids about these dangerous avenues available at their very fingertips should have been as normal as teaching them to use a knife and fork properly. Someone else could have done that job for me, and the repercussions thereof may have been everything else but positive. At least my teens hadn't derailed enough to fall prey to the powerful influence of the forbidden and the magnetic pull of the unknown. This is his personal story, which I have translated and interpreted. For further understanding of specific topics, I have added extra information, including references, at the end of this article. And so his story continues. One of us, a very intelligent guy, was always on Reddit, the massive forum for every possible topic, whether weed, ecstasy, speed, or psychedelics. He was a YouTuber, not a gamer, and because he was never good at playing games, he was always on the internet. While watching videos about drugs, he somehow stumbled across Reddit. Reddit does not have any videos. You can upload a link though. It is a platform that anyone can use. Various topics are listed to which you can give an opinion if you want to. I can write about a topic, describe it a bit, post it, and then I receive many answers. So he got answers to his questions like, how can I do this? What do I do if I cannot find what I'm looking for? He then named a specific drug and received experience reports. He read everything. He wanted to know more about drugs, what they do to a person, how a person behaves, and so on. On Reddit, you can find answers about almost everything. At some point, he stumbled across the darknet through the information he found on Reddit. The darknet is not a platform. The darknet is the dark side of the internet. If you put darknet into Google, you will get an explanation of the darknet, but you will not get an internet site simply because it is the dark side of the internet. The darknet is where everything illegal can be found on the internet. You can even hire an assassin. So it is like a dark street of the internet as we know it. We continued our research on Reddit. Experience reports provided us with information about what types of drugs had been bought. So we learned about what could be done. We found guidelines describing how to order drugs properly. Within 2 hours after we had found what we were looking for, we knew exactly what to do. So this is how we started getting drugs. There is a Tor browser that can be downloaded, which enables you to remain anonymous while on the internet. You just need to Google Tor browser and you will receive a link to download. This you open like any other browser. For example, Firefox, Chrome, and Safari are the more common browsers everyone knows. The Tor browser functions in the same way, except that it falsifies your IP address. So if I'm at home in Austria, the Tor browser would show everyone that I am, for example, somewhere in the USA. Once you have downloaded and opened the Tor browser, Google doesn't know your correct IP address anymore. So you simply type in, "How do I get drugs on the internet?" You then receive instructions on what exactly needs to be done. You go on one of the hundreds of sites that have pictures of drugs for sale. If you know the color the drugs are supposed to have, you can immediately decide not to go to one or the other dealer based on the colors the pictures have. You have to be careful because some drugs could also be bath salts. They are pharmaceutical products that have been prepared with so much crap in them. It's unbelievable. That is why they are so dangerous. So even if I knew exactly what I wanted beforehand, I didn't know if I would get what I ordered or if I would get anything at all. Everything worked with Bitcoin, so payments were never made from a bank account. Once I had the internet site and the dealer I wanted to purchase my drugs from that looked like they should, I needed to create my own Bitcoin account on bitcoin.com. Such drug sales only work with Bitcoin. It would have been dangerous for both sides if it were clear that bank account transfers were made with specific amounts that had no payment references and which were traceable. So I logged into my bank account via the Tor browser and transferred money from my bank account to a Bitcoin account. This transaction is not traceable on every server. Bitcoin has a record that you logged in at a specific time and that you bought Bitcoin. But what you do with your Bitcoin, whether you trade or shop with them, is for you to decide. With your Bitcoin and your Bitcoin account, you can quite easily buy anything and remain anonymous at the same time. So let's say I have Bitcoin. I check out the offers and find the dealer who sells ecstasy pills for a specific amount of Bitcoin. I place my order in my basket and then transfer Bitcoin from my Bitcoin account to the dealer's account. Theoretically, the goods are mine. I just need to connect with the vendor, the salesperson. That is the next problem, because you shouldn't have anything to do with any dealers, which would be the dumbest thing ever. This connection functions as follows. On every internet site where drugs can be bought, they have a PGP mechanism in place. This is a mechanism that encrypts data and is on every site. PGP is not an app you download from iTunes or the App Store. This you download from the specific site while on the browser. So you send a file to the vendor with your information which has been PGP encrypted. As far as I know, PGP has its own submission functions allowing you to send only this particular guy a file. He takes your PGP file, decrypts it, and packages your order with a confirmation from your Bitcoin transfer and sends it back to you. At some point, your order arrives with the post to the address you gave and you have your goods. So I got my drugs home, including 2CP, which we all knew about and found quite easily. This drug was created by Alexander Shulgin, an American scientist who officially produced drugs and also had a group that tested them. They also received deliveries from state laboratories and would test those drugs for the state too. He wrote a book called Pikal, where he described what you could do with drugs like 2CP and ecstasy MDMA. There are about 200 amendments of the drug 2C with different endings which refer to the chemical labels. Because we were all into chemistry, we studied the content of various drugs. Except for smoking weed at home, we never took any drugs alone. We still got the weed from the guy we knew at school. We simply paid him money and made a quick exchange in the schoolyard. I mostly bought about 2 grams every 3 weeks. I sometimes bought 1 gram, which lasted a week and cost 10 euros, which was the standard price then, even on the street. So my pocket money was enough, and the advantage of being in the technical high school was that we had to do practicals where we earned money. For 1 month a year, I earned more money than a normal worker would, and with 1,500 euros, I had enough money for the whole year. That was the money for my drugs. My parents didn't notice anything for a long time, even though I smoked weed once a day on my balcony at home. The weed I bought for a week was enough to smoke a joint every day, but there were times when I had nothing for 1 or 2 weeks. Everyone had to have their own Bitcoin account, and each person bought drugs for themselves. One could decide to buy for another person too, but we didn't want one person to buy for everyone else. The deal was that no one pulled the other into shit. We shared everything we bought though. We bought drugs online about every 2 to 3 weeks, but this didn't last forever, especially after I failed the school year. Then we weren't together as often anymore. Sometimes someone had a birthday party with drugs. Then about 7 of us would be at the party taking drugs together. So from 15 to 16 and a half, I only smoked weed. Then I started taking tablets. We discovered the darknet and had our drugs delivered home. A friend of mine also managed to get drugs from school, but they were mostly ecstasy and 2CB. There was a lot of 2CB at one party, and I quickly became a fan. It gave me an unbelievable sense of pleasure, and the psychedelic activity was very bright and amazing. More of a calmness, not total excitement. I cannot remember everything well though. During this time I became quieter. I turned more inward. I became more introverted. I did not have to control everything. I just enjoyed. I became so calm inside. Everything was indifferent to me. I was satisfied. Everything seemed achievable. When I didn't have drugs or weed, I didn't think a lot about anything. I was ignorant. I didn't give anything any attention. I just looked forward to when I could smoke weed or take drugs again. It was as if I had taken a step out of life. My friends always had fun with one another and made lots of jokes. I always perceived everything differently to them, but I never spoke about it. I was emotionally cold, which was a topic then. Then time came when we found our best dealer. That concludes Enter the Dark Part 2. The story continues in Fall and Rise Again, Part 3. Please also read Austrian Village Teen, Part 1. Here is some extra information. The Sword of Damocles, reference Wikipedia. According to the story, Damocles was pandering to Dionysius, his king, and exclaimed to him that Dionysius was truly fortunate as a great man of power and authority, surrounded by magnificence. In response, Dionysius offered to switch places with Damocles for 1 day so that Damocles could taste that very fortune firsthand. Damocles quickly and eagerly accepted the king's proposal. Damocles sat down in the king's throne, surrounded by every luxury. But Dionysius, who had made many enemies during his reign, arranged that a huge sword should hang above the throne, held at the pommel only by a single hair of a horse's tail, to evoke the sense of what it is like to be king. Though having much fortune, always having to watch in fear and anxiety against dangers that might try to overtake him, Damocles finally begged the king that he be allowed to depart because he no longer wanted to be so fortunate, realizing that with great fortune and power comes also great danger. What is the darknet? Reference eTech. The websites on the internet can be split up into 3 categories: the surface web, the deep web, and the dark web. The surface web are the billions of websites that are accessible to everyone. Sites that can be accessed through a search engine like Google or Bing. The deep web is the opposite. It comprises of all the websites that require permission to access. Examples of the deep web can include emails, banking sites, shopping profiles, databases. It is estimated that the deep web is 500 times larger than the surface web. A small portion of the deep web takes privacy a step further, requiring specific software to access. This is called the dark web, accessed mostly by a software called Tor, the onion router. You might have guessed that the dark web attracts all types of crime simply because of the anonymity of it. In fact, it's estimated that 50% of all dark websites are used for criminal activity. Reference: VPN Mentor. The anonymity provided by the dark web is certainly attractive to those looking to buy or sell illegal goods, such as drugs, weapons, or stolen data. But there are also legitimate reasons for using the dark web. In the past years, it has gained popularity as a safe haven for whistleblowers, activists, journalists, and others who need to share sensitive information but can't do so out in the open for fear of political persecution or retribution by the government or other powerful actors. Police and intelligence agencies also use it to monitor terror groups and keep tabs on cybercriminals. Additionally, corporate IT departments frequently crawl the dark web in search of stolen data and compromised accounts, and individuals may use it to look for signs of identity theft. In many circles, the dark web has become synonymous with internet freedom, especially as nation-states continue to clamp down on it. It now plays host to a number of media organizations involved in investigative journalism, such as ProPublica and The Intercept. Most notably, WikiLeaks, the website that publishes classified official materials, also has a home on the dark web. Even Facebook maintains a presence there in order to make itself accessible in countries where it is censored by the government. What is a Tor browser? Reference Wikipedia. Tor is free and open source software for enabling anonymous communication. The name is derived from the acronym for the original software project name, the Onion Router. Tor directs internet traffic through a free, worldwide, volunteer overlay network consisting of more than 7,000 relays to conceal a user's location and usage from anyone conducting network surveillance or traffic analysis. Using Tor makes it more difficult to trace internet activity to the user. This includes visits to websites, online posts, instant messages, and other communication forums. Tor's intended use is to protect the personal privacy of its users, as well as their freedom and ability to conduct confidential communication by keeping their internet activities unmonitored. Tor does not prevent an online service from determining whether it is being accessed through Tor. Tor protects a user's privacy, but does not hide the fact that someone is using Tor. Reference: VPN Overview. Though Tor's developers originally created the software for military purposes, it has developed into a tool that can be useful to all, especially to those who have something to hide or will otherwise benefit from online anonymity. Many journalists and political activists use Tor to avoid being prosecuted. Usually, these people live in countries where authorities might punish them for the thoughts and views they wish to share online. Similarly, journalists use Tor to protect their sources. If a source does not want to risk being revealed, they can communicate sensitive information through the Tor browser. Not just suppliers of information, but also consumers are to be found on Tor. Many people use the Tor browser to access geo-restricted content, to bypass censorship, and visit specific websites. After all, a lot of pages, such as those on the dark web, won't be visible to you when using a normal browser such as Safari or Firefox. Another well-known group of people who use Tor are whistleblowers. For instance, One of Tor's most notable users and supporters is Edward Snowden, who revealed documents on classified surveillance programs in the US. Similarly, Tor can be used by employees to expose company or government secrets or address illicit or immoral activities. What is PGP? Reference, make use of. PGP stands for Pretty Good Privacy and is most often used for sending encrypted messages between two people. PGP works by encrypting a message using a public key that's tied to a specific user. When that user receives the message, they use a private key that's known only to them to decrypt it. What is Reddit? Reference Wikipedia. Reddit is a website comprising user-generated content, including photos, video links, and text-based posts, and discussions of this content in what is essentially a bulletin board system. The name Reddit is a play on words with the phrase Reddit, namely, I read it on Reddit. As of 2019, there were about 430 million Reddit users called Redditors. Registering an account with Reddit is free and does not require an email address. In addition to commenting and voting, registered users can also create their own subreddit on a topic of their choosing. In Reddit style, users' names begin with U/. For example, noteworthy Redditors include U/poem _ for your sprog, who responds to messages across Reddit in verse. U/shitty watercolor, who posts paintings in response to posts. U/gallowboob, with the highest karma on Reddit. And U/spez, the CEO of Reddit, Steve Huffman. The site's content is divided into categories or communities known on site as subreddits, of which there are more than 138,000 active communities. As a network of communities, Reddit's core content consists of posts from its users. What are 2C drugs? Reference The Verge. There are many versions of 2C drugs, from 2CI to 2CB to the infamous 2CP, which allegedly keeps you high for as long as 24 hours. Each one has its own unique chemical properties and particular effects. The 2C family of drugs has a complex and sometimes controversial past. They are synthetic psychedelics in the phenethylamine class. They were first synthesized by the late Alexander Shulgin around 1974, who is known for popularizing MDMA. Like MDMA, 2C drugs were first utilized for therapeutic purposes among Shulgin and his colleagues and later became known as club drugs. No official clinical trials were done, but there were some experimentation. Rumor has it that a German company distributed 2CB in the 1980s for use as an aphrodisiac called Eros. If this is true, there are no records of it. Who was Alexander Shulgin? Reference Scientific America. Alexander Sasha Shulgin was a top-ranked researcher for Dow Medical in 1960 when he ingested a psychedelic compound, mescaline, for the first time. Shulgin found the experience so astonishing that he devoted the rest of his career to psychedelic chemistry. He left Dow in 1966 and supported himself thereafter by consulting, lecturing, and teaching. Working out of a laboratory on his ranch east of San Francisco, he synthesized more than 200 novel psychotropic compounds. Shulgin tested these substances and others on himself and a group of trusted friends. He and his fellow psychonauts took meticulous notes on their research sessions. Alexander Shulgin's book, Pikal, reference Wikipedia. Pikal, A Chemical Love Story, is a book by Alexander Shulgin and Anne Shulgin, published in 1991. The main title, Pikal, is an acronym that stands for Phenethylamines I Have Known and Loved. The book is arranged in two parts. The first part being a fictionalized autobiography of the couple, and the second part describing 179 different psychedelic compounds, most of which Shulgin discovered himself, including detailed synthesis instructions, bioessays, dosages, and other commentary. The price of drugs in 2018. Reference EMCDDA. According to the European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction, the 2018 drug prices were as follows. Cannabis, between 8 and 12 euros per gram. Cocaine, between 59 and 78 euros per gram. Heroin, between 38 and 60 euros per gram. MDMA, ecstasy, between 6 and 10 euros per tablet. That concludes Enter the Dark, Part 2. This is Kim.E from isnotso.com. Thank you so much for listening.